there's a form of epilepsy in which you have seizures, and during these seizures, you experience ecstasy. They're called ecstatic seizures. Uh, Ecstasy, they defined as a feeling of total well-being and at peace with the universe and in love with the world, or whatever. So ecstatic. Uh, that's why I smoke pot. Well, it makes my ordinary ecstasy is raised a level. Put it that way. But so ordinary ecstasy. The point of that epileptic story is that this state is something that the brain is capable of producing. It just takes activity in a certain part. Now, it's not very practical in everyday life because it's hard to negotiate the world when you're in that state. But it is a capability that the brain is capable of. That's ordinarily not expressed very much, except in these cases. So, when you understand that feeling of transcendence is a certain kind of activity in the brain, you can learn to enhance the likelihood of its happening. That might be one incentive to sit in a cave for 30 years, is to have this feeling of total everything is wonderful, including me. So yeah, it's attractive. But the point is that you can have a version of that without sitting in a cave for 30 years. If this thing I've talked about earlier of learning to turn off the chatter in your brain for a while, just go back and watch it about how you can learn to see the world without commenting on it. And when you do that, then it's a lot easier, and turn off the talking machine, it's a lot easier to experience this state of bliss and oneness. It's hard with all the chatter going on. So you can learn to do that just by, for me that was key. Turn off the chatter, listen for a space between the chatter, and learn to make that bigger. And when you do, you can, anytime you want to, if you take the time, just feel like everything is wonderful. Practically in reality, people are having problems right now, all over the world. But that middle state of feeling tranquil and at peace can be available as a comfort, in an otherwise chaotic world. So you can learn to sort of generate that feeling of oneness with parts of a person's body, or even the whole thing. A kind of feeling of reverence and amazement that such things can exist, as pieces of body. And it's also, there's I talked earlier about how the redwood tree outside is much too complicated to hold all the facets of it in consciousness. But you can look at the redwood tree and you can produce, as I was just telling you, this feeling of oneness and wholeness, and get a feeling that even though you can't perceive with your ordinary senses everything that's going on in the redwood tree, your brain is capable of producing the feeling that you are perceiving the whole redwood tree. it's it's kind of magic, right? It's not objectively true. I mean, as far as objective meaning, sensory inputs that are available to anyone with the right instruments, right? That redwood tree, you can take pictures of it from a million different angles. So if you have the right equipment, you can objectively see the whole redwood tree, more inside, and look at the the veins and everything. So to a certain extent, you can do that objectively, but you can't envision all that information at once. And so that's what I'm saying is you can do a sort of a substitute where you get the feeling that you understand it, that you are one with it, even though you know it's just a feeling in your brain. It's a good feeling. That's how we learn to generate good feelings in our brains. If someone says, hey, there's this feeling, and it's really cool. It feels so good. And you can learn to do it too. Well, until someone tells you that, you're just an ordinary person walking around in the world looking at things in a totally practical, objective way. And it's necessary. You got to do that. But you can add an element of feeling part of it all, which enhances the experience. It's not it's not just a plastic world anymore. Anyway, that whole point. I have new neighbors moving in, so we may be hearing noises in the background. So the sex part, right? When you learn to have that feeling of oneness, I'm trying to wave my hands less. When you have that feeling of oneness, when you can generate it, if you generate it while you're touching another human being's body, so that you feel that brain-generated feeling of oneness and bliss, and you can experience that divorced of any preconception you've had of what human bodies are. We're taught to have feelings about certain body parts, and I don't know about all the nasty body parts that we're not supposed to play with. None of that. So, we're all taught a version of that. Now, maybe you didn't get the nasty version of it, but everybody got some version of how to regard another human body. How do you relate to that? And I'm just presenting this as an addition, to however you're already relating to the human body, is to throw in this feeling of oneness and bliss and union. And for me, it's just incredibly intimate to have that feeling with another person's body. So it's, for me, it's so wonderful. Excuse me. But maybe, as I said to you earlier, maybe it was because I was deprived as an infant that's so wonderful to me. But I think that everyone could enjoy each other and life in general much more if we learn to just do a brain trick. And it doesn't mean the real world goes away. So the first part of enlightenment is to experience some of the states that your brain can generate and realize that someone at some point imagined that state and they passed it along. They said, hey, look, I learned this thing. This is how you get to this state. They didn't say it like that. That's how I say it. But so anyway, they passed the trick along of how you can feel this feeling of transcendence. So it's in your brain. I mean, your brain can make the feeling happen. That's the first part of enlightenment, is realizing that your brain can do it. Now the second part is too good. The second part is that it's true. That everything is one, in a sense. I mean, here's how it is. We, myself especially, because I know it is all, is that everything I say, everything I do, the things I'm doing right now, are just the dynamics of the universe in this particular area. It's not, the effect isn't going very far, but everything everything that's happening at this moment is just the result of cause and effect playing themselves out. So we are all part of this huge process that includes my apartment. And then the house across the street. It includes everything. Everything that, we know about. So, it's like there are at least two ways of looking at the world. One is the everyday way, where it just takes as much as they say it does to pay for a cup of coffee, which I don't do. I make my own coffee. So that aspect of the world, that it exists in just the way we've learned to see it our whole lives, cars work the way they do, and every airplanes work. Everything works the way it does. There's nothing really has changed, except that we can see that they are all part of an ongoing process. Everything. Me. We're just going along with the process. So, it's true in that sense that we are all programmed moment to moment by our experience and how that relates to the world as it is at this second. And that's what propels us, is our brain say, where am I? and how do I get a snack? So that's what they do. And they've been doing it all our lives and all the lives of all the beings that ever lived are just, where am I? And how do I get a bite to eat? And the ones that are here, of course, are here because in addition to providing for themselves, getting something to eat, they reproduce. That's the other the other necessity that makes the whole thing work. And that just happened. So, how that applies to pussies is that all pussies are part of the universe. And every part of them is part of the universe. And you can have that feeling of oneness with the universe simultaneously with the feeling that the pussy is one with the universe. So it's a different way of looking at the whole enterprise. And I talked about the outside part, so I'm not going to cover up that. But I did say I would do another video about the inside part. And the whole thing, it's just amazing that it works. The whole system is amazing that it works. It just evolved that way. I can't believe that we evolved to intake oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. I mean, how the fuck did that happen? Anyway, it did. So there are pussies, and they got to be here the same way. So the marvelous things, negotiations or navigation, I should say, is if you start at the clitoris. I mean, that's something that you can see. Ordinarily, it's out in the open where you can see it. I mean, it's, you can part the hair or whatever, but it's up front. It's the first thing you encounter is the area around it and it. And then if it is enclosed with the labia. So if you open the labia, by whatever means are acceptable, and proceed downward, you'll find first the urethra, which is more interesting to some people than others. And if you keep going past that, you'll encounter the opening of the vagina. And something you should know along the way is the opening to the vagina is right next door to the opening to the alimentary canal. That particular part is known as the anus. And one of the interesting things about human beings is that the distance between the vaginal opening and the anus can vary substantially from like almost nothing, just tiny little thin strip of tissue is all that separates them. And then it can be like, a couple inches wide. So anywhere in between. So that's something you should know about what you're doing down there. Is, for one thing, women, everybody's not built like you. My mother was taking a course as a licensed practical nurse once, and part of her training was she was to give this woman Fleet's enema, and the woman informed her that she had entered the wrong opening. And my mother told the story, that she said, I thought everybody was the same. Well, they're not. My mother was wrong, but she learned, and you should know that there's all kind of variation. So the vaginal opening is synonymous, all mixed up with an opening in what's called the pubococcygeal muscle, because it runs from the pubis, the pubic bone, to the coccyx, the tailbone. And it's the muscle, it's the muscle that allows you to stop peeing if you need to for some reason, or to stop shitting, or if you need to for some reason. So it opens and closes the apertures on your lower anatomy. And it's the muscle you exercise when you do Kegels. And everybody should know what those are. If you don't, you should look them up. So that muscle has to relax in order to allow anything to enter the vaginal area. But it can vary in how fit it is. The point of doing Kegels is to make it more fit. So the more fit it is, the tighter it can close the vaginal opening. And sometimes anxiety can just snap that sucker closed. And it's very hard to get in there, even with lots of lubricant. And attempts to soothe anxiety, and you don't rush at it. It's not something. In fact, I have a tendency to go too slow because I enjoy exploring the textures, the edge, just where you go in. And to some women, it's maddening to have someone stay right on the edge like that and not go all the way in. So that's the first thing. Some people like it, I think, and others don't. Find it annoying. So you once you get past the opening, then you're in Wonderland. It's amazing in there. One thing, one reason, very important reason for being in there, is the clitoris isn't just this little knobby thing on the outside. That's just the tip of the iceberg, as they say. The interior part, it has actually 4 arms, 2 on this side and 2 on this side, that go down around the vagina, and some reach all the way to the rectum. or you do anal sex. Some people, I think, are wired more intensively down there, and they enjoy it more than other people do. So that's, I think, a wiring issue, but it could be a acquired taste. But so once you get past the vaginal opening, and I think, you know, the anatomy texts I have seen have not been really clear on how exactly those arms of the clitoris are located relative to the PCG, the pubococcygeal muscle. And it seems there's probably some variation in that, whether they're right there with it, or whether they're maybe a little further inside. It probably varies between people. But the significance of the way it's made is that it doesn't get enough. The opening has to be sort of constricted for it to be stimulated. If the one just totally relaxes, then there's not much friction between the penis and the inside of the vagina. So it can enhance the feeling for women to learn how to control that PCG. Said the initials, I don't know if I got them right. So that you bring the clitoris in closer for stimulation. And, you know, I've met several women who had really good control and had experience with that, the effects. And one in particular said she learned how to have orgasms from intercourse because she learned to control the tension in her PCG. Yeah. Anyway, she learned to control the tension in it, and she liked to be on top in the I think they call them around the border duck fuck position, where the woman sort of squats over the man, and she can control just how much the penis enters or doesn't enter and how fast. And she can also control that PCG muscle. She can control the amount of tension. And so she said she learned. She can make it feel just like she wants it to, because she's in control of all the variables. And she learned to have orgasms that way. So some women have experimented one way or the other. They're curved dildos that go up inside, and so where I figured the G-spot is you have these two arms of a clit and a little end that pokes out here. So you have these two arms that come down here. Well, they all come together right here, and my experience is, this is the most sensitive part on the inside of the vagina. It's up in this area. But something I think is important is, depending on how much the woman enjoys it, but when you put your fingers inside, and to me, if my fingers could have an orgasm, it feels so good to put my fingers inside a vagina, and then to turn and find that spot where everything comes together. I think that's my theory. And it is where some women are extra sensitive. But the thing is, don't neglect these arms that come down here on the edge of the, along with the PCG. I mean, I like to give them a little stimulation too, a little, because I think it helps to stimulate nerves so that they make stronger connections with other nerves where they do connect with other nerves. And the more they're stimulated, the stronger the connections get. So you get, I think, stronger orgasms when those connections are all exercised as much as you can. So, this one friend said, wake up your vagina. You have to wake it up to make it appreciate all the things that can happen down there. So I think it's just incredibly interesting, and it feels incredibly good to feel inside around. It feels really spacious. But it's the pressure of the everything inside the body pushes the tissues together somewhat. I mean, they don't just exist down there open all the time. So they're pressed together, and and that's the kind of tension that maintains in the part of the vagina that's not highly muscled, like the PCG part. Women have varying sensitivities about their uterus, and some are kind of like to be stroked around there, and some are not so interested. So it's something you can explore if they want to explore. So the inside is very interesting from a tactile point of view. From a sensual point of view, it's just fascinating. And the thing that makes it more fascinating is to have this feeling that it's incomprehensible, that engenders a certain awe about the fact that it fucking works. I mean, sex is so weird. It's so strange to me that we evolved this way, that we have these matching parts, that one part goes into the other part, and doing that makes it feel good. Who designed this? It's incredibly interesting, and it's sort of like it's they've done all sorts of cut dead people up and see how they're made and everything. There's all sorts of ways to see it objectively, but to get the feeling of the thing itself as being much too complicated in all its neurons, blood vessels, all the tissues involved, all the differences in there, it's just too much you can't really contemplate any part of your body and hold it in consciousness very completely. It's in all its complexity. You have to hold a simplified version. I mean, that's all your brain's capable of thinking about. But your brain is capable of generating the feeling that you do. That you do experience the whole thing. So you can experience a pussy like you're feeling the whole inside, and how wonderful it is, and how incomprehensible it is. And it adds an extra element to the experience, that you can generate this attitude as it's happening. So, enlightenment. So my version of enlightenment is just, understand how your brain works, what it can generate, the kind of things it can generate, and learn that the world itself and your brain are just all being propelled along by physics and chemistry. And what makes weather, it's all just being propelled along by the Big Bang, really. Ever since then, everything just rolls along, and human beings are no exception. We just our lives and our experiences and our feelings, they emerge in the same way as everything else does. So realizing that, I think, is what I call enlightenment. is that your brain's capable of having these feelings that are in fact true on some level, and they give you a feeling of being a part of everything. So it's available if you want to experience it. And I think that's my point of all of this, is saying that you have wonderful things available to you. If somebody told me, somebody gave me some kind of a clue about where to go, how to find these things, these experiences. And so I'm kind of trying to pass it along, that you can have some really incredible experience. Your life doesn't have to be dull. You can make it interesting because you have this instrument in your, that you live in. And I'm just trying to teach you a new trick. It's not like, you figure, how do you learn things? If everything is just propelled along like this, that's how you learn things. It's part of how everything is propelled along, is me telling you what I'm telling you, and whether or not it makes any sense to you. It's just all just rolling right along. So let's put a stop to this rolling for now. And I don't know if I have anything else to say. We'll see. Bye.